Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 136, and this is a special surprise episode that we just sort of cobbled together last minute, although we're incredibly grateful for the opportunity. We have a creator interview, and this is our first ever double creator interview. We are speaking with the writers of Pocus Hocus, Alan Dunford and Will Radford. Alan and Will, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Hey,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And especially thank you for the short notice, like being able to accommodate with that. So we appreciate you guys.
Yeah, for a little bit of inside baseball, we're recording this on a Thursday. We were emailing, I think Monday, we set this up. So very, very quick turnaround on this interview. But, I had been given contact through a fellow podcast, and they said, hey, these guys have a Kickstarter out, and anybody who wants to interview them. So Doc and I spoke, and we reviewed the first issue, and we'll have links to it, and we'll go into a little bit of detail. But the Kickstarter for issue number 2 is currently out, and we took a look at it, and we were just immediately like, we literally didn't read everything because we were talking about umpteen other things, but we were just scrolling through, and we said, okay, so the art is kick-ass, and just from what we're seeing, just in like the brief, like 30-second breeze through, we're like, this speaks to us.
Yeah,
so
a little more inside baseball. So it was the first time that Anthony and I had been together at my house in almost 2 years. All related to the whole COVID thing. But yeah, it really was that. It was, wow, I'm really digging how this flows. And oh my God, okay, we're in.
Yeah, especially the last page of issue 1, we were like, oh, okay, I am intrigued. Was that from Django Unchained? You had my, what was it? You had my
Curiosity.
interest, but now you have my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Yeah.
So, like I said, we'll have links to the Kickstarter in the show notes. But Alan and Will, first off, as we like to do with the creators, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, a little bit about your background, how you two came together to work together and write?
Sure. Well, I'm Will Radford, and my background predominantly is in theater and film. That's kind of has been my general area of focus before this foray into comic book writing. But Alan and I have known each other for several years. We met when we were in high school, and we've been friends ever since. And we both share a love of the same things, I think, genre-wise, specifically across all mediums, specifically supernatural horror and dark comedy, horror and monsters, and we kind of have always nerded out over that stuff. And cats.
Don't forget cats.
Yeah, but I think the first conversation the two of us ever had when we first became friends revolved around Quentin Tarantino movies. If I remember correctly, because he was wearing a Death Proof shirt.
Why do you remember that?
I don't know. It's a weird. I don't know why I remember that. I remember weird details about.
You ever seen Ratatouille at the end where he eats the ratatouille and then his childhood comes rushing back? Yeah. That's just what happened with Will.
Right.
The T-shirt.
We've opened up the Pandora's box.
Yeah. All right, guys. So we're already doing our job for Capes on the Couch. So I'm already having a psychological breakthrough of my own. So it's perfect. But yeah, I'm Alan Dunford, co-writer of Pocus Hocus. And my background, really, I don't have a lot of experience with screenwriting or anything like Will does. I came from a retail world, English major in college, and now I work in the home health field. So, it was just kind of one of those things where we just decided to make a comic one day, and we don't know how it happened, but here we are.
One thing led to another.
Yeah.
That's kind of how our podcast started.
Absolutely.
We were best friends, and we were driving to a Tough Mudder, and we said, we should do something with comic books and mental health two topics that intrigue us greatly. And 3.5 years later, here we are.
Yep,
And now we're talking to you.
Yep. As people that met each other in high school, became best friends, and just basically, I'm in healthcare, and we basically just share a lot in common. So we figured let's just go ahead and do this. He has the communications, radio, theater background. I don't have any of that stuff. But once in a
These
while,
stories are so parallel right now.
Yeah,
They really are, like in an eerie fashion.
Yeah.
So you said this is your first story then?
Yeah, this is our first take at a comic book. So you guys complimenting it and saying that it really intrigued you means the world to us because, we're our own worst critics.
Yeah.
So we're putting our first comic book against other people who are very experienced and all this stuff. We're like, well, we hope it's good enough.
Wow. Okay. That's something that I wasn't honestly expecting, because based on, again, I went back and I reread like fully, thoroughly issue 1. And I said, okay, I want to see what else these guys have written. And this is it.
Yeah. Well, technically issue 2.
Right.
But, that's not out yet.
And a draft of issue 3. I mean, in terms of like writing together. Yeah, that's the case. I've written things on my own and various projects like that. But
this is first comic book.
Definitely. Yeah. First comic book. That is true. Yeah. So
that's, like I said, you guys are starting off very, very hot, because I definitely enjoyed reading issue 1, and I'm not trying to oversell this or anything, but if you are into comedy or horror, this is for you. This is definitely the kind of book for you. So what instigated the story?
I actually had this question not too long ago, and it really made me do some soul searching, because the story for Pocus Hocus actually came about years and years and years ago. I think I was 8 or 7 years old when I could barely spell the word magician, which I can barely do that now. But I was trying to write this comic book that didn't go anywhere, and it was just called The Magician. And I was just wanting to make a superhero that was a magician. So then, obviously, shelve it, don't even think about it. Years and years later, I started getting back into the comic world, but really my preference came with manga, because getting into comic books, I didn't do any deep diving aside from the usual suspects. Like I read the popular stuff, Sin City, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, all the must reads. But reading all the other comic books scared me, because I felt like I would never catch up. Because you see Batman Detective Comics issue 1952, and you're like, oh no, do I have to read all the other ones before that to understand what's going on and all this stuff? So that's why I got into manga, was because there's not these random series that split off from it too much or deviate from the main story. So you just have your beginning, middle, and end. And then that's something that Will and I have recently discovered in the indie comic world, because they're just trying to tell their story.
Right.
So that's what's been really cool about that. But yeah, so that's kind of a long-winded answer. But I approached Will with the idea of wanting to make a comic book. And the original idea for it was going to be kind of like Twilight Zone meets Ice Cream Man, where everything was going to be episodic. So, it was going to be about this evil magician that lures people on stage and then does like demonic stuff to them, or is like, doing all this wacky, creepy stuff, and the audience is completely unaware. And that kind of scared me, because, just the idea of watching someone, going through something traumatic while the audience has no idea and they're clapping and applauding along. I was like, ooh, that's a good, creepy horror story. So then now it devolved into a more linear story with Pocus.
I think, it might be safe to say, when he contacted me about the idea, I started to get some ideas based on, and we've talked about like the Faustian influence and stuff like that. And I think we did, long story short, I think we kind of just put two heads together, and this is, what came out of it. But we're very happy with it. And every time we sit down to write, it's like 0 to 100, like the energy. It's like we start out, it's like, okay, it's like, how are we going to, just basic. And like, once we start going, we don't stop. And it's like just one level of imagination after the other. And it's very liberating to do that, I think so.
Well, that is awesome to hear. because Doc and I are working on a writing project of our own, not exactly comic based, but I have a feeling that when we sit down to write, it's very much, I hope at least it's going to be that kind of building off of each other.
Yeah.
So
it's nice to have that personal chemistry too, because we bounce ideas off of each other so much. Even when I think that they're bad ideas, you got to be good to come with them. But I think to piggyback off his point, we get to the point where we're writing, especially with the dark comedy stuff. We always try to one up each other on what we feel like we could get by with.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah.
So it's funny that you mentioned the comedy and the horror. I think this book does that very, very well, that there is some really horrifying stuff in there. There absolutely is, in terms of body horror and possession, and, not trying to spoil too much, but issue 2 has a lot of very demonic things happening in it. And yet there is this air of, I wouldn't say that it doesn't take itself seriously, but there's definitely, when it's funny, it's very dark funny, but it hits you, it's real biting. Is that something that you decided early on was going to be a hallmark, or who decided, how you find that balance?
You're unleashed. Go.
There's just something I want to say about that, because I think, Alan has really witty and awesome ideas for these jokes that we're setting up. And then my sense of humor has always been, I've always been attracted, you mentioned biting, I've always been attracted to satire and humor that cuts, kind of. That sounds kind of dark, but it's true. So I think again, that's an example of that fusion. It's just, we just crack each other up. He'll present an idea, and I will love it, and then it's like we'll have the general outline there, and then we talk about certain reactions and nuances and subtleties, and then that's when I'll try to inject these little, like, moments of awkwardness or moments of like biting dark humor, and it all just kind of fuses together nicely, I think.
Yeah. So, and the other part too, and I know we kind of talked a little bit about this whenever we were getting everything set up, and we'll probably touch on it later whenever we get into the deep delve for the psyche of Pocus, but the flashback scene with his father, we were cracking up when we wrote that. But it's a really dark, sad scene, but it made us laugh with how awkward and dark it was.
Yeah. And just how quick it happens within the context of, like, it happens as a flashback and a memory. And I guess that's one of those double-edged swords where you can do something that is darkly funny, but that is also really gives you an example of why a character is a certain way and what contributes to their psychology and what contributes to their, who they are and that kind of thing. I always think of, the film I, Tonya, I thought did a great job of that. But I know that's a whole other thing, but that just always pops in my head.
That's quite all right. We're all about tangents, so don't ever worry about going too far off.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, just to tag on to that, the idea though, humor is a very healthy defense mechanism at times, especially for trauma, especially for things that have happened in our lives. The thing that I'm noticing, especially with Pocus, is initially he seemed to start off so heavy in his purpose and his goals, and the fact that he's willing to go this far, was what drove that in the first place?
Well, just before you answer, because we sort of been speaking around the plot, and just because I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I feel like we need to give at least some foundation for what it is that we're speaking of. In issue 1, Pocus Hocus is his name, unfortunately, which is, of course, a running joke. And he is a magician who decides to sell his soul to be able to perform actual magic. And as these kinds of things often do, the deal doesn't go smoothly, or things don't go according to plan, but it's not how you're expecting they don't go to plan. And it's largely, at least 50% of it, I would say, the responsibility of the demon to whom Pocus sells his soul, which I thought was just a brilliant twist, and just a really unique way of looking at it. So that's why I enjoyed so much of what happened in issue 1 and that last page, which then leads directly into the beginning of issue 2, which I've had the opportunity to review. And you can see some of that on the Kickstarter page, that the demon is not one of those demons who necessarily has everything all together. So with Pocus, he's looking to impress his father, who is the magician. I assume that the flashback scene, are you talking about the headstone?
Yeah. So,
because that to me was one of the inscription on the headstone was one of the funniest things.
Yes.
In the issue.
Yes.
We were cracking up when we wrote that.
Yes.
We didn't know how well it read because we were afraid that Pocus was going to be one of those things where it reads funny to us, but then when someone else picks it up, they're going to be like, is this just a bunch of inside jokes we don't get?
Yeah. There's always that concern. And, I think that a big reason for making the character that way was we just talked about these jokes landing and having the humor here and having the comic book elements. But one thing we really wanted, plain and simple, was we wanted to make three-dimensional characters have as many three-dimensional characters as we could. So we have always tried to think of each character's flaws or their backstories or, things that have made them the way they are, even if it's something that's simple. But another thing that's interesting to me is that when he gets to when we get into all this magic stuff and he's so dismissive of the demon, like, yeah, I've read I know just take my soul, just get it over with. I mean, yes, there is a bit of arrogance that's part of his personality, but at the same time, I think he doesn't entirely take magic seriously. It's not something that he's really passionate about, whether that be actual demonic magic or performing magic tricks. And it is coming from a place of just wanting to, impress his father. So,
and I do think Will and I could both agree on this. We can, because how issue 2 is on the Kickstarter, where you see the first, we have the first 7 pages. I think we can go ahead and just get full spoiler territory for issue 1. I think, so that way we can really get our deep dive and stuff. So
that's no
nothing's
problem.
off limits in issue 1.
Right.
Okay.
And one more thing I wanted to say about that was, the element of like, why does he want to impress his dad so much? Why does he want to impress his father? It's more than his father just being very domineering and very, his father was famous, and Pocus, there's a very dramatic element to him, and he wants to be famous. But this has been ingrained in his head since he was a little boy. That in order to do that, it has to be like his father first and foremost has to be one that approves of it.
Yeah, so that's why in the whenever we didn't realize we wrote it the way that we did until after we finally got the pages back. But we put a flashback within a flashback.
Right.
So that's why we did the sepia look. So that's why that page is a little bit more tan than all the other black and white ones, because we have Pocus remembering his traumatic events with his father. And that's why the last panel that you see of Richard Hocus is him standing over top of a dwarfed Pocus with all of his accolades. Richard Hocus, the greatest magician in the world, while Pocus just stands there defeated.
Yeah.
So we really tried to dig into that psychology of Pocus, because that's how he remembers his father.
That's very interesting, and I appreciate the amount of thought that was put into these kinds of things, and based on, obviously because of the nature of the show, Doc and I like to do a deep dive into those kinds of things without getting too personal, and feel free to answer the question however you want. Is the relationship that Pocus has with his father, is that rooted in any real world stuff for either of you? Because I know we've spoken to a lot of writers, and they tend to write what so to speak. And, like I said, I don't want to obviously ask too much personal stuff, but
yeah, it's one of those things where my father, he died about 2 years ago. And it was one of those things where you don't realize what you're doing at the time. But then when I went back and, reread Pocus after we, finally did issue 1 and all this stuff, and even just everything, how we laid everything out, it's one of those things where my dad and I, we were never really that close. So it kind of, I think, ingrained myself into this, because there's always that level of, I need to still impress my father, even though we have a distant relationship. And then Richard dies in the comic, and now Pocus is like, there's so much more that I could have done. And what was the point in even doing this whole?
Yeah, for me personally, I grew up with my father was always very supportive and very loving, and I'm very thankful for that.
Oh, get out of here!
No, I mean, but like I think that I think that there is an element of like every little boy wants to impress their father in some way, shape, or form. That's always, just a general universal dynamic. So I think that for me was kind of where, the ideas were coming from, and having it be just relatable at a universal level. You have to give that character motivation and drama for why they do the things they do. So a lot of times that's driven by something that's tragic or sad. And so that's how I was kind of connecting it in my mind. And it's not, I know we've seen things like stories like that before with protagonists who have troubled relationships with their parents.
Daddy issues. Let's just put it, well, it is what it is.
Yeah. But I think it works. I think it works well for this particular story. I'm not a big believer in the idea that just because it's been done before, it can't be done again in some kind of, different way.
Yeah. We're very self-aware that the idea of someone selling their soul for something has been told 1,000 times.
Yeah.
We're just really wanting to do our take on it.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, there are only so many different stories you can tell. The 12 narratives or whatever it is, Joseph Campbell, et cetera. So
yeah. Yeah.
I just love the fact that the demon basically calls him out on it. Like says, like, all right, you know, and I know he dismisses saying, yeah, I know what I signed up for. But really, the demon wanted to know, like, well, why would you even go this far? And he says his dad, he's like, really? That's to oppress your dad? As if it's dismissive, like, that can't possibly be it. And the truth is, for the sake of everything that he considered important in his life in that moment, yes, actually, that was his number one priority. And he didn't dismiss it. He didn't just ignore it. He put all his chips on the table, which is exactly what the demon was doing at the same time.
Yeah, so let's talk about the demon then, because like I said, we find out there's an allusion to it in issue 1 when the demon leaves, and then makes the appearance at the very end. And then the beginning of issue 2, we find out that the demon is kind of in over his head and needs some assistance from Pocus, because what he had received is no longer necessarily in his possession. That hook at the beginning of issue 2, I was like, okay, this just took a turn and I'm in. Again, you had my curiosity. Now you have my attention. I'm like, now I want to know. I see this as like almost like a buddy comedy kind of deal with two very, very, this is like 48 hours gone horribly wrong. What is the demon's kind of motivation? What's the backstory on the demon? How much work have you done on the demon whose name obviously hasn't been revealed yet?
So honestly, the demon was probably the one we spent the most time on.
Probably.
Because he's our demon. We need him to be interesting. We didn't want a one-dimensional demon that was just flat with one-note lines and everything. We wanted our demon to be extremely flawed in every possible way that we could think of, that was also still making him fun on a human level.
Yeah. He went through a lot of different transitions while we were talking about what kind of character he was going to be and different personality traits and things like that, which was
we
so
originally
much fun.
had him as a shapeshifter.
I think we had him at one point. We had him as like
John Lovitz,
and Danny DeVito, and like we went through all these different ideas for him. I'm glad we landed where we did, because it kind of walks that balance. He has this comic book sort of badass, can I say that, appeal, and but at the same time, the humor is there. And another thing I just want to mention really quick about the demon is something we've talked about extensively, especially moving forward from like issue 2 onward, is that his situation and Pocus's situation mirror each other in a lot of ways. And it does function like great demons or monsters in horror movies as being one of those situations where it mirrors the internal world of the protagonist. So I'm really liking that, and I'm really having a lot of fun generating ideas from that core idea.
Yeah, so I don't want to give too much away, because you guys kind of got a sneak peek of what we're working on. You got up to a certain page number where all of our people that are going to view the Kickstarter get up to page 1 through 7. So you really get to see the dynamics of the demon. And even you get to see this in page 1 through 7, he's hot-headed. Very quick to react. And that's what the line that we thought was so funny. I have a tendency to overdo it sometimes after he just slaughtered 5 other demons. So that was something too that we wanted to keep. And then, like I said, you guys got a sneak peek into really some more character building from him. So we're very happy with the direction that we're going.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm incredibly appreciative of all the work that it took to get you here, because your end result definitely shows off the work that you put in. This character is protagonist and antagonist simultaneously, and that's not an easy thing to pull off in a believable sense and an entertaining sense, and yet it works wonderfully here. And I'm not trying to blow smoke. I'm telling you, as somebody who's read thousands of comics, I've got a file cabinet over there full of books. This one merges, like I said, comedy and horror in a way that I haven't seen, that is kind of reminiscent for me of, in a darker, funnier way, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina kind of deal. Like,
oh yes,
in terms of the merger that it has there. And another thing that Doc and I, again, that when we were first breezing through it, that drew us in was the art. It's a very distinct palette. It's a very distinct style. And we thoroughly enjoyed in issue 1 that everything was basically gray, except for the magic itself. That was the splash of color. And there's not a whole lot of color in issue 1. It's largely, like I said, grayscale until issue 2. And then everything involving the demon is very colorized. How did you find the artists to work on the book?
Yeah, so like I said, this was our first comic book. So with that, we have zero connections in the comic world. Luckily for us, our friend Mike Teener, he's an indie comic creator, and he has put out a ton of books. I feel like I'm always getting notifications for his Kickstarter has gone live, and I'm like, oh, what now? So it was easy for us just to kind of go to him and speak about, this is what we want. Do you happen to know anybody that we could piggyback off of? And then he recommended Brian to us, and then the colorist Jason, and then he recommended Dave Lentz to do our lettering. And, like I've been telling everyone, it's kind of my favorite thing to say. After we all got together, meshed ideas, said this is what we want, and everyone was in agreement, we seen everything, and it was a match made in hell. So it's been it's been awesome, and it's so cool too to see everyone get into a rhythm now, because the differences between issue 1 and 2 from a creator standpoint, we very little edits when we get stuff back, because Brian knows exactly what we're looking for. Jason knows exactly what to colorize, make pop, and Dave knows how to really letter everything to bring it to life.
Yeah, we really got lucky, I think, in terms of the team that assembled and the way that all of this meshes together, because the comedy horror balance, or comedy fantasy supernatural balance, whatever you want to call that, is critical, and that could have gone very wrong, and we could have been getting pages back that were not working for what we were trying to do, or working for the meshing of genres. And we've just been blown away from minute 1 every time we get these pages back from these guys. And it's very, it's surreal and also humbling at the same time. It's really an incredible process to be a part of creatively.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think we had 2 concerns. Well, not really 2 concerns. 1 concern, and then 1 we were put at ease. Whenever we got the concept for the demon, we were blown away by it, because we loved Brian's take on it, because it looked ancient. It looked like it came with the forest that it is getting summoned from.
Very Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, perfect. And but then we were like, we love this. This is killer. Oh God, how can we make this guy funny?
Yeah, yeah. That was the conversation we had. I mean, yeah.
We were like, what can we do? Do we need to change the face? Do we need to change? Because how is this guy going to be able to deliver comedy? But then Brian, he knows
what he's doing.
Yeah, we feel like he knocked it out of the park. And then I'll never forget when we got our first page from Brian, which was the forced introduction. We were just floored.
Yeah.
And then we seen the pentagram where he's summoning the demon or getting ready to. We're like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
I think we're set.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, this is not to blow smoke. This is seriously how I feel about this. When Anthony showed this to me and I got a chance to read the entire first issue, and then, starting to read the second, I just figured this is something that you guys had done forever. Like this seemed just so organic and just well put together.
Same.
I couldn't believe what you said when you introduced yourselves. This is incredible.
Yeah, so that was our big concern, was because we were horrified that we were doing it wrong, because we were afraid that if we told a linear story, no one would come back for issue 2. Because one of the ideas that we talked about was like, well, do we already have, like, Pocus already has his powers and he's like an action guy and already, like, showing what he can really do with it, or do we just start from the beginning and risk it and just go?
Mm.
So it's really awesome to hear you guys say that you were still intrigued by it, because, like I said, we are our worst critics, and we thought, man, is this going to be too boring?
Yeah.
Because there's,
that was the concern about issue 1.
Once you read your own work so much, you're not surprised with anything anymore. You know what's going to happen. You're like, oh no, is anyone actually going to like this and care enough to come back for issue 2? Because we feel like we were selling snake oil, because, it's like, we promise issue 2 is going to have a lot in it. We just got to get our origin story just really out of the way, because we want you to understand where everyone's coming from.
How to set everything up. And it's like, once you work on something creatively for so long, you lose your ability to look at it objectively.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And welcome to the world of imposter syndrome. You feel like, oh my God,
yes. Yeah, no, for real. I definitely encounter that from time to time.
So issue 1 is out already, obviously. Issue 2, the Kickstarter, is live. How many issues, how long in advance do you have the story mapped out?
So originally it was only going to be a 6-issue story, but as we keep writing, we discovered that planning for that, especially this being our first comic and getting our story beats together, it's not going to be 6. We're already planning for 7 or 8 just for this first story arc. And kind of like what we said was, as long as people keep reading, we want to keep writing, because we love the world that we're so ready to introduce to everybody. Because even at the end of issue 2, we're just getting started with where everything's going, because we're still building up to our big picture of where we want everyone to go. And I think that's another thing too. As we introduce another character, Emily, his assistant, we wanted her to be very dynamic too. And we have three main characters.
Yeah, she's a major player, and we haven't in many ways even gotten to her yet. So I'm very interested to see what the reaction to her is going to be, because she's a great character.
And that's the thing too. Even after we finish the script for issue 2, we still haven't seen hardly anything of Emily yet. We really see her come to life in issue 3.
Yeah, that's when it really takes off for her. So,
and we did the same thing that we did with the demon. We thought, what is Emily's motivation? Why is she where she is currently? Where does she want to be?
We wanted to have a strong female character, but we also wanted to discuss, in the same way that we discuss the other characters, what are her strengths and weaknesses? How can we make her 3-dimensional? What is her background like? And I think that as the story progresses, all of that will be revealed. And that's kind of all I'll say about it, just, to avoid spoilers.
Yeah. And I give you guys a lot of credit for that format, because at least what I've seen in comics sometimes, especially indie style stuff, is sometimes people feel this need. They got to get every character out at once. And then it's like, all right. And then we'll kind of simultaneously build up what's going on with each of them. In this case, you're kind of getting like a miniature case study with each one as it's going, just building off of what you've already created. And I'm biased, obviously, as a psychiatrist, but that sort of thing to read to me is wonderful, because I feel like it eliminates a lot of the fluff, a lot of the clutter, and it allows the characters really to breathe and people get to bond with them.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is done very well in this book, and one of you had alluded to it earlier, is show, don't tell. That you're seeing these things and you're getting obviously there's exposition. You have to have exposition, but it's very much if you can show it visually, and that's not always easy to do in a medium like comic books, because it's still, you can get away with a little more in live action or even animation, because there's fluidity, and because you can take a little bit of time, and even if it's just a brief scene, you can show movement, and you have that option with motion. You don't have that in comics. You have to put things in panels, and you have to hope that, and it's not necessarily, I'm not trying to take anything away from you, but a lot of it does fall on the artist to be able to show the particular snapshot of the scene, that this is the frame that I'm going to show to encompass everything. Obviously a lot of that comes on the writer to be able to say, okay, this is what I want the scene or this panel to show. But a lot of it does fall on the back of the writer or the artist to say, this is how I'm going to frame it out, from like a cinematography standpoint, even though it's obviously not, live action. All of that to say, again, I think that issues 1 and 2 do a fantastic job of doing a whole lot of show, don't tell, where the story and the action is giving just as much information on these characters as what they're saying. And that it gives you that opportunity to use the exposition more efficiently where you need to, because you know that the story and the art are going to carry more of the load rather than the writers who tend to just say, well, whatever the artist draws, I'm just going to do word balloons over the top of it that they're going to fill the entire page. Cough, cough, Bendis. Like I said, it's a credit to you and a credit to the artist as well that you're able to convey so much in the limited space that you have between the art and the words.
Well, thank you so much. That is a massive compliment, and we really do appreciate that. And just to touch on that real quick, I just want to mention Brian, because I do this. I think I've said this in every interview we've done so far, and it's the truth. His artwork is so good and so beautiful, and there is a silent movie quality to it, And I'm a big fan of the idea of show don't tell. And what I love about Brian's artwork and silent movies is also what I love about comic books, which is that you can have this, as you say, boil it down to single images, and those images sort of speak for themselves. There's just innately a show don't tell quality there. So that does, again, reminds me of silent movies. So that's a tremendous compliment, and I think that Brian definitely. I mean, you gave him credit when you were talking, and I think we definitely should too, because he's excellent with that. And there's actually in our Kickstarter there's a reward involved that is a all black and white copy of the issue where you can just focus on the images without the text and that kind of thing for those of you who might be interested who are listening. So,
well, like I said, I will definitely be backing this Kickstarter shortly after I get off of this this interview, because I was looking at it and I said, oh, okay, I'm going to back this, no question. So assuming, and I believe looking at the Kickstarter already, it's already hit its goal. Is each issue going to be its own separate Kickstarter for the next several issues? Or are you looking to maybe bundle 2 or more issues? What's the distribution mindset going to be like moving forward?
Yeah, so the idea right now, especially we only had 2, was just to put 2 of them together and then just put it into the publisher that picked us up is Bad Bug Media. So the idea then was just to start really putting everything together, so then you can plug and play. And then we always want to have a Kickstarter tier to where you can play catch up, whether that be in physical form or PDF form, because this is a passion project before anything.
Yeah.
So we want people to be able to jump on whenever they feel comfortable or whenever they hear about us.
All right. Well, that's fair. Like I said, I would strongly encourage our listeners, and maybe we'll even do like a giveaway when this comes out. Maybe I'll do one of the tiers that has multiple physical copies, and we'll do a giveaway for our listeners and help spread the word. Because like I said, I have thoroughly enjoyed reading this issues 1 and 2, and I am absolutely looking forward to learning and reading more about this story. And especially issue 3, like you said, with Emily, the assistant. I feel like issue 1 was focused then on Pocus. Issue 2 has kind of been focused on the demon. So then issue 3 is really going to be about Emily, and that's going to be her origin story, or I don't know. I'm speculating based on what you've said, but I'm intrigued. If it's anything like the first 2, I'm in for a hell of a ride.
Yeah.
So what's the time frame then for the issue 3?
Okay, so I think we're shooting for a February to March-ish. I always like to overshoot.
Yeah.
Because on our Kickstarter, I think it says it has rewards getting out to people in January, but we're pacing very well ahead of schedule right now for everything. So I always rather stretch it out too far than be like, oh no, you'll have it on this day, and then everyone's rushing, because we really want to give the best product possible to everybody, and we don't want to lose momentum either, because the campaign, and that's one thing that we were afraid of, because it's weird to us, and I know Kickstarter's so much more than this. Really, Kickstarter's used to get your word out about your product and what you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
But it was weird for us at the beginning, because it's like, so how do we ask people to fund our hobby? So we were really trying to, we were battling with that, because it's like, I've never asked anyone really to chip in on something that I've worked in. And I think that we were afraid too, after issue 1 got funded, we were afraid to put out issue 2 too early, but then we also didn't want to lose momentum. And it's this weird tightrope of what's good, what's not. So then we took a chance, and we literally sent out like the last round of packages. And then maybe 2 weeks later, we were like, okay, well, I think we're ready for the campaign.
Yeah.
For issue 2.
Yeah, we wouldn't know anything about that. By the way, go to patreon.com/capes on the couch, and you can subscribe to unlock additional content. So where can folks, so aside from the Kickstarter, where can folks find y'all on social media to additionally share info about the Kickstarter and the story?
Yeah, so I have a Vimeo account. Well, that's a whole other thing. The Vimeo account is for my short films and things like that. But if anyone who's interested in that, that's vimeo.com/willrad, WILLRAD. I also have an Instagram at the moment, which is willrad82. And I've been trying to get better at posting things on Instagram related to Pocus Hocus. Here lately, it's been mostly through Facebook. So we do have a Facebook page for Pocus Hocus, and there's not a URL for that yet on top of the Facebook address. But if you type in Pocus Hocus,
I think we were the only ones dumb enough to name our project Pocus Hocus. So we should be the only thing that pops up when you search it. And then, of course, for any questions on anything, PocusHocusComic@gmail.com is one of the best ways to get in touch.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we are going to, we'll have links to the Kickstarter in the show notes, and this episode is going to be going up. I know we're recording this on Thursday. This episode will be going up the following Wednesday. So it will still be live, as of the date that it will go out. Like I said, it's already backed. It's already surpassed the goal, but I would strongly encourage all of our listeners to go out and support this Kickstarter, because you're in for quite a treat. It's something really interesting and unique. And I'm very, very glad that we were contacted. I'm the one who does all the social media for the podcast, and it was in a Twitter group message with a whole bunch of other nerdy podcasts. And somebody said, hey, by the way, we're doing an interview with these guys, and would anybody else want to interview them? So I said, yeah, I'll take a look. Why not? We're always down for creator interviews. And like I said, I'm so glad we agreed to this and set this up, because to quote Star Wars, we'll be watching your career with great interest.
Man, thank you. You guys have been great. Thank you so much for having us on. And at any time if you want us to come back at any time or anything like that, just let us know, because I love talking about this stuff. This is my favorite kind of thing to talk about as far as any art medium at all.
Yeah, it's good to talk about this too, because it's nice to be able to share our creative process with actually writing the characters as opposed to writing the story.
Yeah, it's great. So I love it. It's my favorite thing. So.
We coming up, we have and it's funny too, because even with some of the smaller side characters that are coming up, not to reveal too much, we really also did a deep dive with them.
Yeah.
We really always want to make sure each character is 3-dimensional as much as possible,
right?
Even if they're only in for a couple pages.
Yeah, or just even a second. Sometimes it's even just a panel.
Yeah. We're like, so why is he actually standing where he's standing?
Yeah. Yeah, we've definitely noticed that with many creators, that's part of their process, and I always appreciate this, because in my daily life, I deal with a lot of people that are doing some soul searching. This is the first time that I can think, holy crap, what if somebody else actually gets a hold of it?
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. To that point, we spoke to Philip Kennedy Johnson, and he gave us, a master class in world building, and we spoke to Erica Schultz as well. And it's refreshing to hear how many creators really put a lot of thought and effort into this kind of thing to deep dive into these characters and say, okay, this is how we want to tell the story and this is who they are, so that the reactions and the interactions that they have are much more real. And that absolutely comes across here. This doesn't feel like we're just going from beat to beat to beat just because we want this cool sequence to happen. That this is character driven.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
that's incredible. Thank you.
I think, one of the things that after we finished writing the script, we looked at it and we're like, Will, we just wrote a character study.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the conversation.
Yeah,
too. So.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And like I said, it absolutely comes across. So Alan Dunford and Will Radford, creators and writers on Pocus Hocus, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us tonight. And like I said, we will have links to the Kickstarter. And when the book comes out, we will be sure to get some physical copies and we'll do a giveaway to our listeners and help spread the word, because what you got here is definitely something special, and very much looking forward to issues 3 and beyond. I wish this were something more consistent, that I could just go to my LCS and say, add this to my pull list, because y'all would definitely be on it.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah.
So Doc, anything you want to add before we head out?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, I'm just grateful that it's amazing to be on the ground floor of what sounds like something special in terms of what you guys are creating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's fun to be here from the beginning, or, well, it's close to the beginning.
Yeah. So very rarely this happens for me, but I'm speechless.
Yeah.
So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Will. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.